Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Intentional Man Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Luttrell. John, thanks for joining me today. I've been looking forward to sitting down and talking with you, and we finally were able to get it together in our schedules. So thanks for carving out some time to sit down with me today. Looking forward to the conversation. You are a man of many talents, and I'm just looking forward to going through those things, some of the things that you're involved with, and learning from you. And I think our listeners and those who are watching the video will as well. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you asking. I know how busy you are as well. It never hurts the ego to be asked to talk on a conversation like this.
Oh, so yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, John, I know a good bit about you. You shared some of your highlights with me before we got started. So you're involved in a lot of things. As I said, you're a licensed clinical therapist. You teach yoga. You teach martial arts. You do so many things. You work in the church. I mean, you're a very active man. Tell us a little bit about yourself, just so people get a general idea of who you are.
Sure. Well, I'm getting old.
Yeah, as we all are.
Weeks.
Yeah.
Things don't work as well as they used to, but I'm trying to keep things going as well as possible. That's why I teach yoga. I teach martial arts because I love it, but I teach yoga because it's good for me. I got involved with a fitness program called MOVNAT, which is all about natural functional movement. And I like to practice that because it keeps me able to do normal things.
Okay.
Getting up and down off the ground without using my hands. Say I have something in my hands. That's great. I just want to be able to do that. I want to age to the point where I don't feel stuck. They say if you stop moving, you lose the ability to move.
Right.
I don't want to lose the ability to move.
Right.
I want to be absolutely perfectly functional when I die.
Yeah.
As weird as that sounds.
No, I agree. When we may touch on this a little bit later, but that MOVNAT, when you sent me that, I looked it up to see what it was all about because I hadn't heard about it before. And I find that super interesting. As you and I've talked about, we do personal training. And I think this is an excellent thing to layer on top of that because our goal, it really aligns with this. Sure. It's not just how big and strong can you get, but it's more, what do you want to be able to do when you're 85 and 90, and how do you get there? How are you going to be able to do those things? Sure. The hiking, the natural movements, carrying a bag of groceries up 2 flights of stairs when you're 80.
Yep.
But you don't accidentally get there, do you? You have to intentionally get there.
So my grandfather, he passed away when he was 85. But I remember that, up until he passed away, he would still go hunt deer, climb in a deer stand, haul the deer carcass out of the woods by himself.
Yeah.
I remember when he was in his early 80s, the thing that made me feel most accomplished at the time was for the first time he asked me to help him cut wood. He was clearing out a hedgerow, and he had a whole bunch of wood cut, and he wanted my help to cut it and load it into the splitter. He could have done it himself, but he asked for my help, and I was like, he has never asked for help to do this before.
Yeah.
This is my man day.
Yeah, that's right.
This is the day I made it.
Yeah.
So that's where I want to be. I want to be that.
Right. So again, maybe we'll get into some more of that later, but go ahead. What else are you involved with?
Most of the things that I'm involved with, I discovered a few years ago that what I really like is I like helping people, whatever that might be. That's why I like to teach. I work with South Carolina Vocational Rehabilitation. We help people with disabilities find employment or get themselves into a better place in their life. I do counseling, mostly with adolescents. I enjoy that. It makes me, they say there's no such thing as altruism. Maybe that's true. I don't know. But it makes me feel good, and it makes me sleep better. And I naturally tend to want to do those things. So those are the things I do. Volunteering at the church. I like that. I like helping.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm an introvert by nature, and that means that interacting with people requires emotional energy. I like people. I like dealing with people, but it requires emotional energy. So all of my jobs require emotional energy. So sometimes I got to just go home and be by myself for a little while to get it all back.
Kind of recharge.
Yeah. I've got a friend who's an extrovert, and he gets energy from being around people. And when he's by himself, he loses energy. I don't understand that at all.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not quite sure what I am, introvert versus extrovert. I do enjoy being alone sometimes, just having that time when you're alone, kind of recharging, like you said. But I also do enjoy, maybe similar to you, I guess. I enjoy teaching. And, we do a series, as you've been a part of, the 84 Days series. I love that type of thing. Feeling like you are hopefully making a difference, that the Lord's using you to make a difference in someone's life, even in a small way.
Sure.
It does. It feels good. It feels like your life means something. And I think men need that, don't they? They need to know their life has purpose and meaning behind it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've been involved as a ministry leader with Celebrate Recovery here at Cornerstone Church for a long time. I think everybody's got issues in their life that they struggle with. Everybody's got scars. Everybody's got wounds. Everybody's got things that cause behaviors that impede their life.
Right.
So I think things like Celebrate Recovery, I think things like your intentional program, those are designed to get you past your own stumbling blocks that you don't even know they're there sometimes.
Yeah.
They just become so habitual, they become invisible.
Yeah. You mentioned that all of what you do or a lot of what you do anyway, is to help people develop that strong character.
Sure.
And there's so many different ways to come at that, isn't it? And you approach it from a lot of different ways.
Yeah. I mean, well, as Christians, there are lots of different ways to be a Christian, but the way I look at it, the word Christian literally was initially an insult that meant little Christ, right? That it was formed in a city where they were like, oh, look at those little Christs. They're trying to be just like him, right? That's how I want to be. I want to be a little Christ. And that means when all of my selfish impulses arise, I want to be able to recognize them as best I can. I can't. I'm going to be selfish. I'm going to make bad decisions. But I want to be able to recognize them, and helping people helps me keep the focus off myself. Because I got to tell you, by nature, I can be a very selfish individual.
Yeah.
I can be a person who really focuses on yourself. But I find that if you do that, it makes you more miserable rather than more happy.
Yeah, it does. It's interesting that a lot of people, even being involved in some of the things that you're involved with, different ministries and helping people, still could come at it from the wrong perspective, to where it's still self-serving. I'm doing it for the recognition. You see that a lot in social media, where maybe someone goes up to a homeless person, right, and gives them a new pair of shoes or some money or whatever it is, right? But what's following them? The camera, right? Do you do that same thing when no one's looking? And from what I know of you, and I've known you now for a little while, I do get the feeling, your heart's definitely in the right place. You've told me you have problems saying no to people. Maybe that's why you're here today. Yeah. You have problem. It's hard for you to say no because you want to make a difference in people's lives.
One of my personality flaws. Yeah. It's only 15 minutes. It's only half an hour. It's only an hour. I'm learning to set boundaries so that I don't do that quite as often. Or at least I can choose the things that are most important.
Yeah. Well, thanks for not putting me behind that boundary.
No, I was a pleasure to be here today. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I appreciate it. So let's talk about, just briefly, some of the things that you are involved with, the clinical therapy. And you work with people with disabilities, you said. So tell me a little bit about that.
So my primary job is I'm a training center manager with South Carolina Vocational Rehabilitation. Our job in vocational rehabilitation, what we do is we help people who have pretty much any kind of disability. The only one we don't specifically work with is vision impairment, blindness, because there's a separate agency in South Carolina for that. In many states, it's combined.
Okay.
But we work with, if you have diabetes, high blood pressure that are not easily controlled, if you have a bad knee, bad back, if you have a learning disability, intellectual disability, if you're on the autism spectrum, if you have depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, mental illness, anything like that. If you have been in the jail system, well, you're automatically considered to have a social disability. So we help our consumers to either find work or keep their work if they're working already.
Okay.
There are a variety of services we can offer. The training center brings in people who haven't worked for a while, and we get contracts from local manufacturers so we can put them to work in a limited basis. It's like work with training wheels. So they can get used to the world of work. They can, develop things like teamwork, communication, punctuality and attendance, professionalism, that sort of thing. to get them to the place where they can be independent.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you have a disability, the definition of a disability is you have something that interferes with some aspect of your life. And sometimes it's so confusing out there. You know, if you have been a truck driver for your entire life and you've developed sleep apnea and back pain, and now you can no longer drive a truck because you can't pass the DOT physical, or it's just too painful or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
you don't really know where to go.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Right.
you know, we put people through college sometimes. We retrain. Sometimes it's just a matter of helping them clarify their path so that they can figure out, oh, yeah, I would like to do this, and I
Right.
think I would be good at it.
Right.
So that's my day job.
That's interesting. Yeah. So you're empowering people to make change. You're not just handing them got a handout here. This will sustain you for this month. You're actually setting them up for an improvement in life, a new direction,
Right.
and empowering them.
I tell my consumers every day that we are here to help, not to do.
Right. I like that.
We want to help you along, but we don't want to do it because we want you to figure out how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because ideally, once you get this job, you should never have to see me again.
Mm-hmm.
You should go live your life exactly the way you want to. And if you encounter me in the grocery store, something like that, we shake hands and we're friendly and everything like that. But you don't need me in your life every day.
Right.
So
that's good. You know, we worked with Samaritan House a little bit here in town. Mm-hmm. It's a homeless shelter for those who are not familiar. And they do something similar. They have some relationships with, I think, Husqvarna and maybe a couple of other bigger industries around here. And they do, again, a similar thing. They'll help them get plugged into a company like that and hopefully bring a life change. You know, it gives them a new opportunity to get out of the position they're in, so it doesn't just become a revolving door where they're out for 6 months and back again. They're actually experience life change.
Some of our consumers come from Samaritan House.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's a really neat organization.
It is. It really is. So the clinical therapy, when I started working for Voc Rehab, there was a program through the federal government, RSA scholarship, where I could go back to school and I could get my master's because they need people with vocational rehabilitation degrees. And I did. And that opened the door for me to get my licensed professional counselor, which is, you have to be licensed to be a counselor. You take a test, you do it's sort of like an internship. But now that I have my license, I work at the McCord Center, which is a local place that runs through the alcohol and addictions. They have the Dawn Center, which deals with adults, the McCord Center, which deals with adolescents.
Okay.
Primarily, they see people who have addictions, but they'll see most of my clients are people who are just struggling with life, individual psychotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly adolescents. I tend to see mostly adolescent boys because they don't have very many male counselors, and sometimes the males interact better with the male. Sometimes they interact better with the female. So it just depends on what they need.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you, just not to interrupt, I just want to ask, so with that, do you find some of the other things we'll be talking about, do you find the principles from martial arts and things like that being something you integrate into that counseling with the adolescents and other guys?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The style of counseling I use most often, especially with these people, is called cognitive behavioral therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's based on the idea that how you think influences your behavior. And your behavior is what's causing you complications in life. So if we can change how you think, we can change your behavior.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a very poor self-image or a very low self-esteem, that's going to influence all of your interactions. So if we can change how you think about yourself, it's going to change how you interact with people and change your behaviors. If you have you're always rebelling against authority or something like that, which adolescent males, that's kind of what we do sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of that time that comes from fear, anxiety, right? If you're kind of afraid all the time, it makes you aggressive and defensive because you have to keep people out. You have to strike first. Right.
Yeah.
And so changing that viewpoint, giving someone more confidence, more assurance about their abilities to deal with life and feel better about themselves can often help them change those behaviors that are causing them problems. So
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the saying? The quote is, "As a man thinketh, so is he."
Yes.
Right.
Exactly right.
And the Bible talks about it as well. What's in a man's heart comes out. Same principle. Right.
You'll find a ton of psychological principles in the Bible.
Yeah.
Long before they were psychological principles.
Exactly.
Because it's true.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That's neat. That's neat. So you teach yoga. My biggest, I guess, my biggest familiarization with yoga is the meditation piece of it. Tell me more about it. I'm not very familiar with it. So how does that integrate into your practice?
Yoga is a practice from largely India. The word yoga literally means union. Right? What they're talking about is union of body, mind, spirit, so that you're in your mind and your spirit are in the same place as your body, doing the same thing at the same time.
Okay.
Right? If you put it in psychological terms, it's about being present all the time.
Okay.
There are lots of different ways to do yoga. There are spiritual yogas. There are physical yogas. I practice mostly the physical yoga. I do not object to the spiritual practices, but I'm a Christian. That is not me. That is.
So I was going to ask you: is there an integration point there? Because again, from what I understand, yoga is on the spiritual, from the spiritual point of view, is it's really. I think traditional yoga is basically emptying your mind, isn't it? And becoming kind of, almost blank. Mm-hmm. But if you integrate the spiritual piece of it into it, the Christian spiritual piece into it, is there a place where that could actually fit? Where it's like, I'm prayerful. I'm
Sure.
thinking on things of God as I do this.
So you were talking about meditation earlier. Meditation means to think deeply upon, mm-hmm. right? For some, meditation is attempting to clear the mind of thoughts, which is incredibly difficult to do, mm-hmm. right? Yeah. Because thoughts just pop in there all the time.
Right.
In Tibet, they call that the monkey mind. It's like a monkey in a cage who's just bopping around all over the place, right?
Right.
But the Bible talks about meditation a lot.
It does.
Meditate on the Word of God. It means to think deeply about, to focus
mm-hmm.
on it. And it's a matter of focus, right? Now, there are lots of kinds of yoga in the world. Modern Western yoga is primarily focused on the physical aspects of yoga. It depends on the school you go to as to how deeply you're going to get involved in the other aspects as well. For mine, it's mostly about the physical. It's people think of yoga, they think of really bendy people who mm-hmm. are stretching all the time.
Right.
So it can be that, but there's a lot of strength and balance and things like that in yoga as well. There's a position called Chaturanga Dandasana, which means 4-limb staff pose. And basically, imagine you were doing a push-up and you went down, but you hovered off the floor about 2 inches, so you're in the lower part of a push-up, and you just stay there.
For how long?
How long?
Indefinitely.
However long you need to stay there.
Right, yeah.
Right? That's the posture. The posture is down there.
Okay.
So, that'll get you sweating.
Oh, I bet, yeah.
The various warrior poses, which are a standing pose where your legs are bent and your posture might be one leg forward. It's almost always one leg forward, another leg back in extension. So you look like a fencer doing a lunge.
Okay, right.
But imagine holding that posture for 30 seconds, a minute, mm-hmm. 2 minutes, whatever, or holding that posture, moving to another posture, moving to another posture, then moving back to the first posture. But the entire time, your thigh muscles are under tension.
Okay.
They're contracted.
Right.
So they're working.
Yeah.
For my classes, I'm not a great yoga teacher. I don't pretend to be a great yoga teacher. I am what is available for the people that come to my class, right? But the first half of my class, the first half hour, we tend to work on strength. I want to get them sweating. I want to get their heart rate up. I want to get their physical capabilities up. The second half hour, we work on mobility, which is about developing that ability for your muscles to extend to their full length. I don't like the term flexibility very much.
Okay.
Because muscles are not rubber bands. They don't do this. What they do is relax. And when your muscles relax fully, you're flexible. You can bend anywhere. Mm-hmm. If you're on an operating table and you're under anesthesia, those surgeons can tie you in knots, right? Because your muscles are completely relaxed.
Yeah.
Most of the time, when we say we're tight, what we have habitual comfort places,
Mm-hmm.
right? We
Right.
sit,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm sitting like this, my back muscles are engaged, my hamstring muscles are engaged, my gluteal muscles are engaged because everything's designed to hold me in this posture.
Right.
And if I sit like this, these muscles are going to get strong in that posture, and they're not going to get comfortable in another posture. So if I bend over to touch my toes, those muscles are like, oh, we don't go here.
Right. And what I've heard is it's a perfect point. I don't know if you were familiar with Peter Attia. I listen to a lot of his podcasts, and he talks about how it's not that our body can't do those things. Like you're saying, you don't trust your body.
Right.
So going down into a squat as an example, going into a deep squat, it's not that we can't. It's we're not stable enough and we don't trust our body. He said, because what you could do, you could try to do that deep squat standing in the middle of the floor, and maybe you won't be able to do it. He said, lay down on your back and then bring your knees up.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it. Your knees will extend to that point. You're just not trusting your body.
Right. Your mind is basically saying, you're going to die.
Yeah.
You shouldn't do this. You're going to die.
Right. You're going to fall at least.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So I think so mobility I define as flexibility with strength,
Mm-hmm.
right? It doesn't help me to be able to put my leg behind my head if that's the only useful purpose I have for it.
Exactly.
I need to be able to do something with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's mostly a matter of training the body into a new, we are allowed to go here. We can't, we're allowed to touch our toes. We're supposed to.
There's a benefit of doing, yes.
So
they say there's a test you can do to see exactly how not flexible, well, flexibility to a degree or mobile to a degree, but also stable is by putting on your shoes and socks without touching the floor. So basically bending over, getting your sock, putting it on, then bending over, getting your shoe, put it on, tying it, and then putting that foot down and copying the same thing with the other foot.
I actually, because I'm older and I have to, I make that a regular practice. I almost never sit down when I put my shoes and socks on. Or when I take them off. I challenge my balance to do that.
That's good.
Because I need to.
Yeah.
Because that sort of stuff can go away,
When we do our training, one of the foundational things is the stability and balance piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because we, like you, we try to focus on functional training. So obviously we want you to be strong. We want you to look good. But it's more about, is your body healthy? What are you doing with this strength? Is it more than just aesthetic? Is it actually benefiting you? Are you going to be able to move around?
Sure.
And so we work on balance and stability nearly every workout.
Right.
That's part of it. Doing exercises, balancing on one foot and different things like that or warm-ups before we get started. Because, again, you're probably very familiar with this. They say people, I don't know if it's 60, definitely 70 and above, their likelihood of falling and injuring themselves obviously goes up exponentially. But the big problem is you and I fall down, we get up, we might be a little sore, we're probably okay. Mm-hmm. At 65, 70 and up, you fall, you may break a hip. And they say the chance of a person after breaking their hip at that age group, it's like 20% chance that they're going to die in the next year.
Sure.
So it's serious. But when you sort of begin working on that stability and mobility at a younger age, 30s, 40s, 50s, preparing for what you want to be able to do when you're 80 and 90, then you step off that curb unexpectedly. You don't fall. You catch yourself.
Right. We get good at doing what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's the point of practice. Mm-hmm. The problem is that as we get older and things get harder, we're just like, oh, I'm just getting older. I'm not going to bother to do this anymore. And then we lose the ability.
Right.
You can get it back, but it takes a ton more work.
It does. Yeah.
I have relatives who they sort of stopped moving. And now, there's a decent chance that when they get out of bed in the morning, they could fall. Mm-hmm. And when they fall, they can't get off the ground by themselves.
Right. Right. That's a scary place to be, too.
It's a scary place to be. And I don't want to be there. Mm-hmm. I don't want my relatives to be there, but people are allowed to make their own choices. Yeah. I've talked to them about it, things like that, but they have to choose for themselves. We all have to.
Yeah. Well, the good thing is, like you said, it's not impossible for someone, even at that point in life, to actually make a rebound and make a comeback and gain strength. They used to be thought that someone, especially in the elderly years, could not gain muscle, but they've proven actually you can. Now it's more difficult. Yeah. It takes maybe double the protein. I don't know that for sure. That's not a fact. I'm saying, but it takes a lot more protein because your body doesn't take it up as easily as it did when you were younger.
Yeah.
But you can do it. So for anybody listening, if you feel like you're in that position, like, man, I can't even hardly get out of bed in the morning, or you're in your 30s or 40s and I don't want to become that.
Right.
It's all about getting out there and exercising and making an effort to not be that way.
Right. And don't try to jump in and join a gym. Start with small things.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't walk.
Right. Yes.
Start with bending over to pick something up. Pick something high. Get an empty bucket, an empty 5-gallon bucket that doesn't weigh anything.
Mm-hmm.
See if you can bend over and pick it up, because it's going to be about 1.5 feet off the ground.
Sure. Right. Yeah.
And then work on other things like that. But always start small. Start on the floor. Get on
Especially
the floor.
if you're having problems already. Yeah.
Get on the floor and then see if you can get on your hands and knees. If you can get on your hands and knees, you're in a decent place. And then you can work on sitting on the floor, getting back up. Sitting on the floor, getting up without using your hands.
Yeah. And they actually have some training associated with that, where they teach you how to, because we tend to forget that. A little kid, they do it without thinking. They spring up without even thinking about it. You get into your even 30s, 40s, 50s, and you're like, wait a minute, this is tougher than it used to be.
It is tough.
So they actually will teach you movements, how to swing your leg, how to position your body in order to get up with one hand or no hands. But it is important, because you said a few minutes ago, a lot of people in their older age can fall and they cannot get back up,
right.
Which in one way is extremely frustrating. It's like, I could do this without even thinking about it when I was, 20. Now I can't do it. What happened in those 50 years or 60 years between that brought them to that point? And it really is the lack of intentional training for a lot of people. Some people may have had injury or whatnot, but a lot of people, it's just, they didn't do anything to prevent it.
Right. I have a friend, who's a few years older than me, about 5 years older than me. And we were talking, and he was asking about MOVNAT specifically. And he was like, I think I need to start doing that because I have grandkids and I want to be able to get on the floor and play with them. And I don't want to have to be near a table or a chair so that I can get down and then get back up.
Right.
And I want to be able to pick them up. I want to be able to play with them. And that's something to think about as well.
That's good. So tell me, let's talk about that a little bit, and then we're going to get into the martial arts piece of it, because I really want to hear about these different styles that you taught. But so let's talk about MOVNAT a little bit, because that's functional training. There's a purpose behind everything you teach there, correct?
Right.
Yep. Tell me about that.
I'll give a brief history.
Okay.
Back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, there was a French sailor. His name was Georges Herbert. And if you're French, sorry about that pronunciation.
Yeah.
And he was stationed on a ship, and they were off the shore of an island, and there was a volcanic eruption on the island. And so the people on the ship were doing their best to help evacuate people as much as possible. But while he was doing that, he observed people who died because they didn't have the physical capability to save themselves. And so he started developing a program of study that was based on natural functional movements. Walking, running, jumping, lifting, carrying, climbing, throwing, that sort of stuff. The stuff that people are basically designed to do.
Right.
And he got the French military to let him train a bunch of sailors. And it was a very successful program. And then World War I happened. And since his sailors were probably some of the fittest, most capable individuals out there, they all immediately went to war, and most of them died because it's war. World War I, and that's
Oh yeah.
But years later, the French government started to take that program, and they developed. You're familiar with military obstacle courses?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, they developed his program into what became military obstacle courses, which became adopted by militaries all around the world.
Okay.
And he called his system natural movement, basically, in the French version, which I'm not even going to try to say. Parkour came from those military obstacle courses.
Yeah.
Because parkour, basically, the core part of parkour means run, right?
Okay.
So, and the course that we have in a military obstacle course also comes from that same root word, to run. Right?
Okay.
So parkour came from that. And then there was a guy named, what's his name? Lacour. I can't remember his first name. But anyway, he was into parkour. He was into a whole bunch of these other things. He had a military grandfather. And he started to look at these, and he started to divorce it from parkour, which was increasingly becoming about the running, jumping, climbing aspects. But they didn't do a lot of lifting. They didn't do a lot of carrying. They didn't do a lot, that sort of stuff. So he started to look at those, and he started to develop those into a system of training for himself. And that's what MOVNAT became. It's based on fundamental principles, right? There are six elements to almost every movement you do, right? There's posture and balance. There is sequence and timing. And there is, sorry, I forgot the last two. When I teach them, I remember them. But right now, I just don't remember. But anyway, every movement has that, right? We have to have the correct posture in order to, even when we're running, when we're jumping, we're going to start from a posture, right? When I go to jump, I'm going to bend down, putting my legs under tension, probably going to swing my arms back as I bend forward. When I jump up, the proper sequence is my legs start to extend, my arms come up because my arms are going to help me lift.
Momentum,
right?
Maybe,
They're going to help me lift, and they're going to help carry the body upwards. Then as I get ready to land, my arms are going to come back so that I can bring my hips back underneath me so that I'm not landing with my feet forward, because that would result in a fall. And then I'm going to stabilize by bringing the arms forward again.
Okay,
right?
so similar to plyometrics to a degree. Working on the explosive power, but also the stability when you come back down.
Sure.
Right. Okay.
Exactly. And so for the lifts, most of the lifts that MOVNAT does are the Olympic lifts, because those are the most functional. Right? They don't do a ton of bicep curls. I think bicep curls are a great thing, by the way. But they do deadlift. They do clean. They do jerk.
Okay. Yeah.
Because the idea is to get the weight up, to get the weight to a carryable position, whatever it might be to your shoulder, it might be to your chest. They have chest carry, they have shoulder carry.
Right.
They work on carries with people. How do you carry somebody on your shoulders if you have to? There's one called a lumbar carry, where you're carrying them on the small of the back. It's great if you're going for a limited distance and you need to get them up quickly.
Okay.
Right? Because they're just resting right there, sort of like a ruck on the lower part of your back. Shoulder carry is great if you have to go for long. It's harder to get them up there. But it also leaves a hand free so that you can navigate obstacles and things like that.
Right.
So
do they do a lot of practice with sandbags and things like that, or what do they?
Sometimes we use people.
Do you? Yeah.
I have a group, fitness group that meets on Saturdays. That's another thing I do, I guess. Sometimes we use people. We practice crawling. Crawling is a fundamental movement. Babies crawl.
Sure. Yeah.
And you can crawl on your knees, but you can also lift your knees, and you can crawl faster that way. And if you're trying to get out of a burning building, that's a great way to go. Yeah. There are ways to crawl using your shoulder blades on your back.
So those are things that you practice in the military obstacle course. I was in the Air Force, so some people may argue that that's the easiest, maybe, but we still did the obstacle courses, and you would go under the the low barbed wire areas. You're crawling and over the obstacles, all those things, swinging on the rope, and different things like that. So
and all those things apply in martial arts too. I mean, especially the ground-based movements. But you need to be able to do those various things. You need that explosive power. You need the functional capability, because there are lots of different martial arts out there with lots of different purposes. The martial arts I focus on is designed to be useful.
Okay. Sounds like that's a common theme in your life. Even in the counseling, everything you do has a function to it. It's not just to necessarily know how to defend yourself. I mean, obviously that's an important piece of it, but it all is useful to life in some way.
Sure. Burpees?
Yes.
I hate burpees.
Yeah.
I hate them.
Yeah.
I refuse to do burpees. You ever heard of a sprawl?
I've heard of the term, but maybe not how you're referring.
So in martial arts, a sprawl, especially if you're doing like Jiu-Jitsu, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, something like that, a sprawl is a way to kick your weight back quickly so that someone can't seize your legs and throw you.
Okay. Gotcha.
A functional sprawl, if you're practicing it, looks a lot like a burpee. You drop your hands to the floor, you shoot your feet back so you're in a push-up position. Instead of doing a push-up, you drop your hips to the ground, then bring them back up, jump to your feet.
Okay.
I didn't do the jump, right? And I didn't do the push-up.
Right.
But I know a lot of people whose burpees don't do push-ups anyway, and their jumps are like that kind of thing. I'll do sprawls all day. I hate burpees.
Yeah.
I won't do a burpee. I'll do a sprawl with a jump.
Yeah.
And it's just a thing in my head that switches as soon as I do it.
Right.
Okay, the sprawl with a jump, That's useful. A burpee, that just makes me tired and angry.
Exactly. Yeah. A waste of my time here. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. So, I mean, let's get into some of the martial arts stuff you've done. I was impressed, man. You're not just focused on one. Like currently you teach jiu-jitsu, if I'm not mistaken. And karate. Okay. But you also have taught, I've got a list here, Escrima.
Escrima is a Filipino martial art. Sometimes it's called Kali. Sometimes it's Escrima, Kali. There's another term for it as well. But they're all basically the same. They're Filipino weapons-based martial arts.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's interesting to me because my wife is 50% Filipina. And so she has that part of her family. And I know some of her family, or at least through social media, they're still in the Philippines. So is that still an active form of martial arts there?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's if you look up Escrima, you're probably going to see it referred to as traditional Filipino art or FMA, Filipino martial art, something like that.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's actively practiced. It's practiced across the world too. It's based on the idea of using knives, machetes, and swords, and sticks. And there's an empty hand aspect of it too. But interestingly enough, they teach you the weapons first before they teach you the empty hand. Because they consider the empty hand to be more complex and less useful, because if you have a weapon, it's more useful to you.
Right. And you only need the empty hand if you drop your weapon.
Right. So when Magellan was circumnavigating the globe, he made it to the Philippines. The Spanish had muskets, they had cannon, they had horses. The Filipinos had Escrima. They beat the crap out of the Spanish.
Oh, wow.
That's why Magellan didn't quite make it. He died in the Philippines.
Yeah.
Because that's what they did.
Yeah. So. How about that? Yeah, it's interesting. What drew you to that? We'll talk about some of the others, but what drew you to Escrima?
So I had two primary teachers when I was first taking martial arts.
And you started it, just real quick for the listeners, 15 years old, I believe you were?
Yeah, 15. Yeah. I started with Kuk Soo Won, which is a Korean martial art. Took it for about 6 months. Sort of ran out of money. Then when I turned 16 and could drive legally by myself, I got a job at a local movie theater and I had money. And then the Karate Kid came out and I was like, I got to do martial arts again.
Yeah.
And so I found another studio in town, and it was run by my primary teacher, John Miller. Mr. Miller, he was pararescue in the Air Force. He was a police officer. He'd been doing martial arts for a long time. The thing about him is he studied a lot of different martial arts.
Okay.
And when he taught, he didn't say, this is this and this is this, and we're only practicing this.
Okay.
He taught whatever he felt like teaching, and it was all blended together. And then my second primary teacher was a man named Bill Sanford, who was good friends with Mr. Miller. They trained together for a long time. He also studied a lot of different martial arts, karate, jiu-jitsu, both taekwondo. Bill studied Escrima a lot, and that bled over into Mr. Miller, so I got some of it from him and some of it from Bill. So I wouldn't call myself an Escrimador. I'm not good enough for that. But I understand the basic principles, and I practice the basic principles and the basic techniques because it adds to my other martial arts. The Pinjat Salat, that's another thing I studied at some point. That's because Mr. Miller studied it, and he was teaching me that. And the thing is, with martial arts, there are only so many ways for a human body to move, okay? And that means for efficient self-defense, there are only so many ways you can do a thing. Now, every martial art's got a different viewpoint on that same center source and a different way of looking at it, but they all have a lot of their root techniques are the same. When you punch somebody, you're just punching somebody. There's a way that karate people punch people. There's a way that boxers punch people. If you strip all the other stuff away, they're a lot the same. If you're going to throw somebody, you're going to have to take them off balance. If you're going to take them off balance, there's so many ways to take them off balance.
Sure, right.
So whether you're doing jiu-jitsu or Brazilian jiu-jitsu or aikido or judo or whatever, there are only so many ways. Karate has throwing techniques too. It's just that modern karate sort of went away from those because we tend to get into the sport versions of things. But
right. You teach not the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, if I'm not mistaken. That's more of a on the floor or on the ground type method. You teach what version?
It's a Japanese-based jiu-jitsu.
Japanese-based.
I can't remember the root name. It's been so long. Thing is, as a teacher, I'm going to teach whatever I think is useful to my students.
Right.
I tend not to use Japanese terminology in class very often because they don't speak Japanese.
Right.
Yeah. And so if
they're
you're
there
in
for the
Japanese
technique.
class,
Right.
when they say "gedan barai," right, to a Japanese speaker, that literally means the thing it means. It means sidekick.
Okay. Right.
So why don't I just call it sidekick too? That's my viewpoint.
Sure.
Right? I like to keep things as simple as possible. I'm not a very formal person, but. So the Japanese jiu-jitsu is the older version, obviously, and it was developed as battlefield techniques for samurai. Right? Samurai actually don't want to fall to the ground because they're in the middle of a battle. And if you fall to the ground, you're going to die.
Right.
So their techniques were, if I get too close to use my weapon with somebody, how can I throw them to the ground so that I can kill them? Or how can I break their limbs or take their weapons or do something like that? I don't want to fall down.
Sure.
And if I do fall down, I want to get back up as quickly as possible. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu developed in a different situation. It developed in Brazil, in Rio, in some very dangerous streets, right? And I think Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, by the way, I'm not going to say anything about it. I think it's a great martial art. However, if you're fighting more than one person, you better be really good at it. Because if you take somebody to the ground and all their friends are still standing up, they're going to start kicking you.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense. Right.
So I utilize as many Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu techniques as I can. I can study them. I can learn them. But I tend to teach my students that if you fall to the ground, know enough to get back up as quickly as you can. Right. If you get stuck down there, if you're stuck down there with a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy, do your best. Cheat like crazy because he's going to be better than you.
Yeah.
Because that's what he studies for.
Right.
But what I want you to do is I want you to be on your feet, be mobile. If you go to the ground, I want you to live long enough to get back up and see what you can do.
Yeah. So you really take a blend of all that you've learned through the years to build a program for your students that really encompasses everything to keep you alive and be able to defend yourself to live another day.
Yeah. And I like to do research. I like to, when I hear about, YouTube is a blessing, right? Now, if you don't know anything about martial arts, YouTube is going to screw you up because you don't know what you're looking at, whether it's useful or not.
Sure. Yeah.
But if you have been studying martial arts, in my opinion, and okay, I can see how that works. I understand how that works. You can take stuff from all over the place, right? I can see and go, that's a really cool variation. Oh, you know what? Now that I think about it, I can see that in karate, or I can see that in jiu-jitsu, or I can see that in Escrima.
Yeah.
There's so in karate, there's a thing called a single block, right? Here to here. Okay. In Escrima, there's a thing called sinwali, which means weaving. It's a stick pattern, and it goes like that.
Very similar.
Yeah. And then another form of karate, and also some other martial arts, there's something called a fan block, which goes like this. Okay, that's the same thing. My arms did this every time. Right. Whether it's a fan block, whether it's a single block or a double block, or rising block, or whatever the case may be, or whether I'm doing that simile with the sticks. Yeah. There's a little microphone hit there. It's the same movement. Right. It's just got different focuses and different applications.
Okay, gotcha.
So I like to try and find the core and the kernel because that's where the principle is going to lie. I don't teach from technique because if I were teaching from technique, it would be something like, okay, you're standing with your right foot forward and he punches with his left hand. You're going to do technique number 1. And right now you're standing with your left foot forward. He punches with the right hand. We're going to need technique number 2. Right now he's standing with his left foot forward. And he's punching with his right hand. We're going to need technique.
Yeah, you're trying. Okay, which foot was forward? What was I supposed to do? Yeah,
I'd have to teach a million techniques.
Right.
But if I can teach you the principle of if someone is punching at you and your hands are already up, you're in a better place, right? And when they're punching at you, if you reach straight forward, like you're reaching your hand for their face, your arm is going to be in the way of their punch, probably 90% of the time.
Okay.
Right? And when that happens and he starts to draw the arm back, he's probably going to punch with the other arm, right? So I'm going to have this out here, and I'm going to be aware of that other arm, and then I'm going to do this.
Okay.
I only need a handful of principles.
Right, right.
Like I said, there's only so many ways to off-balance somebody. If I can move your head out of position with your spine, your balance is bad.
Okay.
If I can move your hips out of position with your spine, your balance is bad.
Right.
If I know that, right, then I can create as many techniques as I need to. And if I understand the principles really deeply, and I have a toolbox of sort of variations in there, then I can create it as I go. And I'm not thinking about it. My body's just doing it because it's done it so often.
Yeah, yeah. And after practicing for so many years, again, since 15 practically, you've got this natural, probably glossary or dictionary in your mind of the movements and, how to apply, where do they apply, and how do you combine them, and which makes you an excellent instructor. Because if I'm not mistaken, I know you're a black belt or maybe higher in Jiu-Jitsu. And
so I have paperwork formally in 2 different martial arts.
Okay.
I have a 5th degree black belt in Goshin-Do, Goshin-Budo Karate.
Okay.
It's the same term. And that came from Mr. Miller. And I have a 6th degree black belt in Koguryu Ninjutsu, which also came from Mr. Miller.
Okay.
There's a substantial amount of jiu-jitsu training in there that primarily came from Bill and Mr. Miller, but they weren't awarding certificates in it. So
yeah,
I don't care about the paperwork.
So what, 15, or when you were 15, what drew you initially to martial arts? You said Karate Kid basically drew you back in, but what appealed to you?
So when I was in middle school, I had to do a report for a class, a research paper, and I did it on ninja because I'd never heard of them before, and I thought they were cool. So I did it, and I discussed, talked about historical roots of ninjutsu and how it worked and sort of the things they did, how they were basically survivalists at heart. They were interested in useful things, and they weren't interested in playing fair at all. And I thought that was cool. And then years later, when I was 15, some friends and I discovered that a Kuk Sul Wan teacher was going to be teaching out of a local health club. And we're like, that sounds cool.
Yeah.
We want to go do it.
Yeah.
And I started doing it. I fell in love with it. And then, like I said, I ran out of money. But when the Karate Kid came back, I was like, all right, I just got to do this. And I went and found Mr. Miller's dojo. It was a small cinder block building in Main Street. It was July 1984. It was hot. There was no air conditioning in there. I remember for the first 6 months to a year, I would train 2 hours a day, 6 days a week.
Wow.
Because he didn't do formal classes. You showed up and used the place, and he instructed you as he saw fit.
Oh, okay.
He was just there all the time.
Right.
That doesn't really happen in martial arts these days. But for the first week, I remember I'd go there, I'd work out for an hour, I'd go to the bathroom and throw up, and I'd come back out and I'd work out.
Work another hour.
Yeah. I remember driving home one time where I couldn't close my hands because my forearms were so swollen.
Wow.
But I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then at some point, I kind of started to run low on money there too because I was paying for private lessons and things like that. And but at that point, Mr. Miller got used to having me around. He was like, I tell you what, if you will assist me in teaching, if you will help me keep the dojo clean, if you will do all this stuff, then we won't worry about the rest of it. So I would go with him to seminars, and I would be his uke. The term for uke means to receive, but basically it's the guy who gets thrown. Or punched.
Yeah.
If you get thrown or punched, you're the uke.
Gotcha. You were the practice dummy.
So I was the guy he would demonstrate things to at a seminar,
right?
And then everybody else would practice it and things
Gotcha.
like that. And so I just stayed with him through the rest of high school, through college, through a lot of my early 20s. Fell out of touch for a while. Started training with Bill because I knew him. Fell out of touch again. Got back in touch with him. We practiced on my own. Then I started teaching probably in my late 20s.
Mm.
I didn't really want to teach at that point, but I had a good friend who wanted to learn, and I had another friend who didn't know anything who was going to start teaching him.
Mm.
And I was like, I should probably go check out and see what they're doing.
Right. Yeah.
So I started teaching and taught for a while, and then quit teaching for a while. I was just practicing alone, and then started teaching again. And I really like teaching.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's good. I've had some of my students since I started teaching again. I have one young lady who just finished her first year of college, and she started with me when she was 6.
Wow.
So,
well, my wife and I were able to see one of your classes, and it was just fun to watch. I mean, the people you're training are very responsive and put their effort into it. And it looked like anyway, a fun experience, but a tough experience. I mean, you're pushing them, and they're having to do some tough stuff in there, which is good, right? I mean, it's what they need to be doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I tell them all the time that, if it's hard, you're growing.
Right.
Easy is ice cream in bed. If you want easy, stay in bed and eat ice cream.
That's right. Yeah.
If you want to get better, come here and we'll work on it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I like that. So tell me just in general, some principles that you have learned, that you have taught through the years that are applicable to life. What can you extrapolate from martial arts and all the other things, the MOVNAT, all of that? What would you pull out of those experiences and say, here are, 2, 3, 4 principles that you use maybe in life to make decisions, to live life, and that we could apply as well? What would you say?
Sure. Getting better is hard. That's how you know you're getting better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay? If you want to get better, work at it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And every day, try to get better. Every day, try to get a little bit smarter, a little bit faster, a little bit stronger, a little bit. It doesn't have to be a ton. If you can run 500 feet, make it 501 feet. If you can run 501 feet, make it 505 feet.
Mm-hmm.
Right. If you can lift whatever you lift, say you deadlift 150 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Maybe try deadlifting, put another plate on there.
Right.
Put a 5 on each end, see where that goes.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Always try to be a little bit better today than you were yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't have to kill yourself to do that. Right.
That's the importance of tracking too, isn't it?
Yeah.
No matter what you're doing. I mean, it could be weightlifting. It could be a change in eating habits. Could be anything, right?
Yeah.
It could even be in your devotional time.
Right.
Track it so that you know that you're improving, getting better.
Right. Learn something every day.
I like that. Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't have to, you don't have to memorize a whole book a day.
Mm-hmm.
Just learn something new, because when you learn things, it stays with you.
Mm-hmm.
You get to keep what you learn.
Yeah.
So I think that's important. I tell my students that all the time. And that, easy is for rest, but if you want to get better, it's going to be hard. It's going to hurt. Right.
Mm-hmm. Don't avoid the pain.
Don't avoid pain.
Yeah.
You are responsible for your own decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing I focus on with my kids all the time.
Yeah.
If they show up late, they have to do 30 push-ups.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a punishment, it's a consequence.
Right.
Sometimes consequences are good, sometimes consequences are bad. At least from this consequence, they get stronger.
I think someone did come in late when we watched your class, and they did push-ups.
If they've been in my class before, all I really have to do is glance at them.
They knew. They already knew. Yeah. Yeah.
Push-ups,
yeah.
Right? And that's
yeah.
And so there are consequences for your choices.
Mm-hmm.
I also tell them all the time, when I ask you to do a certain number of an exercise, if I say do 40 front kicks, I'm not counting your kicks. I don't care about your kicks, right? They're not my kicks. I don't get better from doing your kicks.
That's true. Right? Yeah, right.
So the only person you cheat, if you cheat yourself, is you.
Yeah.
Right? You cheat yourself out of the opportunity to be better.
Right.
So if you decide I'm only going to do 20 kicks and I'm going to just stop.
You don't know. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah.
You're the one who's going to have to deal with
You're
the fact
suffering.
that you didn't get better.
Yeah. We, my wife and I joke around, say it's not a treat, it's a cheat. If you don't finish your set, or if you eat something you're not supposed to, you're not treating yourself, you're cheating yourself.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, and I firmly believe that you have to be responsible for your own decisions.
Yeah.
You can make a bad decision, just don't blame the whole world for your bad decision.
I think that's something that we get in the habit of doing pretty easy too.
Sure.
I mean, we don't want to take responsibility for our decisions. We want to find someone else to blame or a reason, an excuse. But ultimately, man, owning up to it and moving forward is the best thing we can do.
Right. Most of life is out of our control. The thing we can control is how we react to the things that happen.
Sure.
So if a bad thing happens, you have to deal with it, right? You can't pretend it didn't happen. You can. You absolutely can. But it's not going to be useful to you.
Yeah. But we can control the environments we put ourselves in and what we invest in. There's so many things, I believe so much pain we can avoid, the wrong kinds of pain.
Sure.
We can avoid just by being more intentional with where are we placing ourselves? What are we investing our time into? What are we allowing ourselves to look at on our devices? I mean, all those things, man.
Absolutely.
They will bear consequences. They're going to bear, repercussions. This is what happens when this happens, and if we as men can begin to take more control of our day, and say, hey, this is what I'm going to do today. Not just let the day happen to us, but we intentionally approach the day. I think we can avoid a lot of trouble. But in general, you are absolutely correct. I mean, we can't control the world, though. We can't control the bad news that we may get and sicknesses and those types of things. So how do we react to them? And I think, Daniel, and we did a podcast with Daniel Hell. He had experienced cancer at a pretty young age. I mean, he's mid to late 30s, totally unexpected. That's something that was not in his control. Wasn't something he could do anything about as far as receiving, getting cancer. He didn't live a bad lifestyle, didn't do anything to bring it on, but it happened. But what I love about his experience, his testimony, is how he handled it. What it did is it showed the type of man that Daniel is. He has kept a positive attitude and trusted God through the whole thing, and just been an inspiration, right? I mean, you've seen it as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's what it does, though, when we experience those unavoidables. It's how do we respond to them, because that's going to show us the type of man that we are.
Yeah, and sometimes you're going to fail. Sometimes you're going to make a bad decision.
Absolutely, yes.
And when you fail, learn from it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, another thing I tell my students all the time is that failure will lead to success if you don't let it trip you up.
Good one, yeah.
And if you've never failed at something, if something came easy for you, you actually probably have a lesser grasp of what you're actually learning.
Yeah, and you probably don't appreciate it nearly as much either, right?
So I've had some friends who were naturally talented. I knew a guy who was naturally talented in martial arts. I mean, he was Taekwondo practitioner. He was the guy who could do the kicks up to the ceiling. He could do the leaps, the jumps, the spins, and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
He's a terrible teacher.
Really?
Because he doesn't know how to explain it.
Yeah.
He just does it.
Yeah.
He never had to think it through.
Right.
He would just say, well, do this. And he would do it.
And then he wonders why you can't do it. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to fail in order to learn it really well.
Yeah. Good point.
And I think almost all of these are all Christian principles.
Yeah.
If you read the wisdom literature, if you read Job, and if you read Ecclesiastes, and if you read Proverbs, all this stuff is in there.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah. So, because taking what you guys said, getting better is harder. The Bible, nowhere in the Bible does it say that, to follow Christ is going to be easy, right? To get better as a man, to follow Christ, to be a Christian, it's going to be difficult. In fact, I mean, we know every disciple of Jesus, with the exception of John, who was still, exiled on an island by himself, and they tried to kill him. They tried to boil him, wasn't successful. But all the disciples, they died. Mm-hmm. But they died because of the relationship they had with Jesus. They knew what they were dying for had purpose and was real. And so it's not easy. So we have to do the hard things.
It is literally the phrase, take up your cross and follow me.
That's it.
Take up this incredibly heavy thing, which leads to the most ignominious, shameful circumstance you can possibly imagine.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound easy.
Not at all. No. And I think as Christians, we can get disillusioned thinking, hey, when I make the decision to follow Christ, that life all of a sudden is going to be better. You hear the kind of the health, wealth, prosperity gospel, and there's nothing wrong with having money, of course. I mean, if you're blessed with money, maybe it's more not that because you're following Jesus, it may just be because you're a good businessman.
Right.
because following Jesus doesn't guarantee us riches. I mean, go tell someone in a third world nation who's in a dump looking for food, but is a Christian, that's how it's supposed to happen.
That's often where you find the strongest Christians.
That's exactly right, because their relationship is found strictly in who Jesus is, not in what he's giving them as far as, health, wealth, all that. But we can be disillusioned thinking that, well, I don't have, lots of money, or I don't have a brand new car or big house, whatever. It's not what it's about. The blessings we get is just in that relationship that we have with the Lord, that he walks with us every day through the hard times, and knowing that it says we're pilgrims here. This is not even our home, man. We are setting up treasures in heavens, what the Bible tells us to do, right? So if we're doing, and I look at what you've explained to me, how you really do enjoy investing in other people and helping them to develop that discipline and character. And I know you don't do it for the recognition, but it's those types of things. I feel like that, man, that's what the Lord's like. That's what it's about right there. He's investing in others. And I'm sure there are times that even the principles you're teaching in class or other places that there's correlations drawn to, hey, this is biblical. You're able to have those conversations as well. I'm sure you've had many of those through the years. That's what it's about, though, right?
So I need to go back to yoga for a second. In yoga, at the end of class, most of the time, they always say namaste, right?
Mm-hmm.
So namaste is it's a word that's a phrase. And it means, loosely, the divine in me recognizes the divine in you, okay? And from a Hindu perspective, that's a particularly powerful thing to say. The way I view it as a Christian is that I recognize that you are a child of God as much as I am a child of God, as worthy of respect, dignity, peace, and joy in your life as I am. I'm not better than you. I'm not less than you. We are the same under God. So when I say namaste in class, that's the intention that I have in mind, which is a very Christian perspective. I think that Christianity has to inform your life. Otherwise, you're just going through the motions. And that's it's like doing martial arts and not being able to apply martial arts. Right? It's useless.
Right.
Not that Christianity is designed to be useful. It's designed to bring you into a relationship with your Creator, which is the best possible place you could be.
It's the reason we're
because
here.
Your Creator loves you enough to bring you into the best possible place.
Right.
But we are very self-focused, afraid individuals most of the time.
Yeah.
We don't trust easily.
Right.
That's difficult.
Right. Yeah. That's good, John. You said, third thing, you're responsible for our decisions. And I believe, again, that has Christian application. I tell, of course, my children, but also others, share with men that every thought that comes into our mind doesn't belong to us. You said earlier how difficult it is to truly empty your mind. It's like the caged monkey bouncing around. Just because a thought pops into our mind doesn't mean we have to own it.
Right.
The Bible tells us to take every thought captive, compare it to the Word of God. If it doesn't line up, get rid of it. Don't give it a place. Don't give it a home. But we're responsible for that. We're responsible for our decisions that we make. And again, that's just something, living life that way, realizing that we don't have to be trapped in a mindset or what our mind is telling us about ourselves. We're not good enough. We're never going to be able to get this thing right. Those are things, they're thoughts, and we don't have to own them. And not saying that's easy. I mean, that can be very difficult. I mean, you've seen it. I mean,
find it challenging.
Well, that, but you also know in your counseling, I'm sure that's, mindset, like you were talking about at the beginning of the podcast, mindset is huge because so many times our own mindsets limit us. And, a book I went through recently, it's called Habits, Atomic Habits. And I was talking about how if you want to change a habit, establish a new one, say you're a smoker and you smoke for 20 years and you want to stop. He said that, I think James Clear is the author. He said that in order to do that, one of the best things you can do is change your identity. And by that, he means rather than saying, I'm a smoker trying to stop, you say, I'm not a smoker. Right? Because it's two different perspectives. If I'm sitting, and I'm not a smoker, but if I was sitting in a somewhere with a friend, whatever, and they say, hey, you want a cigarette? And I said, nah, man, I'm trying to quit. Different perspectives. Said, no, man, I don't do that. I'm not a smoker. It's just different because
Absolutely.
you're re-identifying yourself. You're not battling against something. You're saying, no, I'm a different person, right? And I think direct Christian application there.
Absolutely.
We are new creatures in Christ, right? Whenever we are saved, whenever we accept Jesus in our life, we are not the same anymore.
Right.
It's the biggest miracle of all, I believe, that we can be one thing 1 minute in God's eyes, and yet by accepting Jesus Christ as our Savior, we are totally different after that. Now, again, not that we never struggle with something. We'll still have struggles. It's still human. Exactly. But we are different. And that's what the baptism, when we're baptized, that's what it represents. We go down to the old man. We're reborn as a new person in Christ.
Yeah, it's a beautiful concept.
Yeah.
It's not just a concept. It's a beautiful reality,
Yeah, right.
That we can be different. We are still not going to be perfect. That's where grace comes in.
Sure, yeah.
We're going to make mistakes, but we are no longer defined by our worst moments.
That's right. Something I've never really liked is someone that said, not the person, but I don't like the phrase, I'm just a sinner saved by grace. While that's true, you're still identifying as a sinner. Mm-hmm. I'm no longer a sinner saved by grace. I'm a Christian saved by grace. I'm new. I've been recreated, and I need that grace.
Yes.
But that's not who I am. I'm not who I was. I'm not having to identify as that sinner any longer. God doesn't see me that way. Right. So, man, that's great stuff. And then the last one I wrote down is that you said failure can lead to success. And so we should not be afraid of failure. In fact, there's a principle in business where it says fail fast, but fail forward, right? So, and Elon Musk actually practices that. I mean, how many rockets have they blown up trying to launch them into space, right? But he's kept going. He didn't slow down, man. I mean, they're firing them off one after the other, failing fast. But look who's known for it. Boeing's got one up there now, and it took them so many years to even get one up, into space. And they haven't lost nearly as many as Elon has, but Elon has been so much more successful because he's just digging in and not afraid to fail. And when they fail, they identify the problems and make corrections and do it again. Right. The worst thing we could do, of course, is just keep repeating the same thing we're doing.
Right. Well, that's the advantage of not just being you, having other people around to say,
100%.
Hey, let's change this.
Yes.
I my kids all the time. I have a lot of kids. So I have a kid right now who's he's got self-esteem issues. Mm-hmm. Okay, in my martial arts class.
Yeah.
And when he makes mistakes, he gets very frustrated with himself. And I have to remind him, this is the place to make mistakes. Out in the real world, if you're trying to protect yourself, you don't want to learn the mistakes there. Learn them here.
Yeah, right.
Improve here.
Right.
You made a mistake. Okay. Are you a horrible person? Did you die from it? Did anyone else die from it? Did the roof collapse? Nothing cataclysmic happened.
Right.
You made a mistake.
That's it.
Let's change something and try it again.
Yeah. So, you're creating a safe space for your students, and we all need that safe space where we can fail and not be condemned or criticized for it. Not encouraged to not saying it's okay, keep doing the same thing over and over. Right. No, it's not patting them on the butt and saying you're okay. It's no, here's how you do it differently. Let me teach you so you can get better. But hey, man, this is a safe spot. Fail here. And again, that's how we try to raise our kids, our individual kids. Like, man, it's okay to fail. Don't be afraid of failure. This is a safe place. Our home is a safe place. The world's not always safe.
Right. Most of my kids' students fail at least one of their belt tests.
Yeah.
And I say, whether you pass, whether you fail, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to stop teaching you. I'm not going to halt your progress where you are. We're going to keep learning. As soon as you learn the thing you need to learn, we're going to keep moving.
Right.
Failing a belt test means you failed a belt test, and it means that we practice harder and we try again next time.
Yeah.
So
that's good stuff.
And I think it's important for them to learn that lesson, because so often life is trying to teach them never fail, never make a mistake. If you do, your life is over. You're worthless.
That's right. Or don't let anybody know.
Yeah.
That's what another thing you find on social media is everybody runs their highlight reels. Here's the best of me, and trying to give the impression this is what their life is all about. They don't show the failures, the breakdowns with the kids and all those things. And which, again, nobody really wants to do that. but we have to realize that everybody fails. Everybody has problems, and hiding them to a degree, it may make us feel better for the moment, but when we expose them, when we bring light onto them, that's when we're able to get better. We're able to be taught, and learn and grow. So, John, kind of wrapping it up, what's one piece of advice that you would give to a man? This is the Intentional Man podcast. What's one piece of advice that you would give to a man to live an intentional life?
Apart from the things I already said, I would say find men that you can respect to associate with, that you respect, not just but
right.
people that you respect who consistently do the right thing, and hang out with those men.
Yeah.
Because people say, oh, he came under a bad influence. The worst influence you can come under is the influence of yourself. Because you tend to reinforce your own things that you want.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You will tend to give yourself the break. You will tend to make the excuses for
That's
yourself.
right.
So find men you respect so you can come under their influence.
Excellent.
Okay. And they should be the people who are willing to say, dude, you're screwing up. Or that wasn't good.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
And they're going to be there to support you. They're not going to be like, okay, you can't hang out with me anymore because you made a mistake. They're going to be the guys who are like, that was a mistake.
Yeah. Yeah. They love you enough to tell you. They're not doing it they're not doing it to condemn you.
Right.
They care about your well-being. Yeah.
The only people who will, not the only people, you have to love someone enough in order to invest the energy to help them change.
Right.
Because if I don't love you or if I don't like you, I don't care if you fail. No,
I'm going to celebrate your failure.
Right.
Yeah.
If you want to screw up.
Yeah.
It's too much energy for
me.
Right.
Right.
Now that being said, I try to love everybody, but even so, it's a whole lot easier to let somebody crash and burn.
Yeah.
So surround yourself with those people, men or women or whatever, your peers, who are going to show you a better way and allow you to correct them and they correct you.
Right.
Because you do not want to figure it all out by yourself.
Yeah. It's going to be a long, bumpy road if you do.
Yeah.
Man, John, it's been excellent talking with you. Thank you for your perspective.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely, man. Maybe you have to do it again sometime. We'll find another topic that's applicable and get back together. But thank you for the time. Thank you for all the advice. And I hope that our listeners and viewers have enjoyed it as well. And is there any information you want to share with them as we wrap up? Anything you'd like to share? Your the Jiu-Jitsu classes, anything like that you like to tell people about?
It's very local, obviously.
Yeah.
So I don't have my own dojo. I teach out of a local dance studio, Tamerlan's Dance Studio, by the way, which is a great place to learn dance. They also run the Orangeburg Civic Ballet.
But
I teach on Fridays and Sundays. Kids' classes are from 5:30 to 6:30 on Friday and 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock on Sunday. Adults are immediately after that. So that would be 6:30 to 7:30 and then 4 to 5. It's only 2 days a week. But if you're local and you're interested, we'd love to have you. Anybody's welcome. I recommend try the class before you pay for it, because maybe it's something different than what you're looking for, right? Make sure, and do that with anything. If you go to a martial arts school and they won't let you see a class or they won't let you try a class before you pay for it, probably don't go, because you don't want to get stuck in a even for a month. You don't want to pay a month and then discover, well, this is not what I was looking for.
Sure.
This is just crap.
Yeah.
And especially a lot of places these days use 2-year contracts, 3-year contracts. You don't want to get stuck in a contract paying for something that you don't like.
Right.
It's just not what you were looking for. So
good advice.
Love to have you out there. I guess that's about it. Cornerstone's a great place to be if you're local as well. It's a good church.
That's right. Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, Cornerstone in Orangeburg, South Carolina. Love to have you visit sometime as well. Well, thanks again, John. Appreciate your time, and I look forward to next time.
Thank you.
God bless you. God bless you guys. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Intentional Man Podcast. If you haven't already, please follow us, give us a 5-star rating, and share the podcast with a man you think may enjoy it. If you'd like to contact us, you can email us at theintentionalmanpodcast@mententional.org. For more information about our show topics, visit us online at www.mententional.org. We hope you have a great week, and remember, guys, choose to be intentional.